The sun was high in the sky as Jasmine Williams checked her watch. It was 2:15 p.m. on a Friday, and downtown was buzzing with the usual end-of-week energy. Men and women in business attire rushed past, some heading to late lunches, others hurrying back to their offices. Jasmine took a deep breath and pushed through the heavy glass doors of National Trust Bank. The cool air inside was a welcome relief from the heat. Jasmine adjusted her simple black pantsuit, comfortable enough for the informal meetings she'd had earlier but professional enough for banking business. She'd chosen to skip the blazer today because of the heat, wearing just a silk blouse under her suit pants. Her natural hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and she wore minimal jewelry, just her mother's gold earrings and her watch. As CEO of Horizon Technologies, Jasmine had built her software development company from a small startup to a $50 million business over the past decade. Today, she needed to complete an urgent wire transfer to finalize an international acquisition, the kind of deal that would take her company to the next level. The paperwork was tucked securely in her leather portfolio, along with her identification and authorization documents. Jasmine glanced around the bank. She'd been coming to this branch for over 15 years, first as a young professional with big dreams, later as a small business owner, and now as the head of a thriving tech company. The marble floors had been redone since she first started banking here, and the old wooden counters had been replaced with sleek, modern ones. Ironically, her company's success had helped fund those renovations. Horizon Technologies accounts made up a significant portion of this branch's holdings, something in the range of $15 million. The line for the tellers wasn't long. Jasmine pulled out her phone to check emails while she waited. A notification popped up. The team in Singapore was waiting on this wire transfer to move forward with the server infrastructure purchase. Just a little longer, she thought, typing a quick response to let them know the funds would be on their way shortly. "Next customer, please," called the teller, a young woman with glasses who Jasmine didn't recognize. Jasmine approached with a warm smile. "Good afternoon. I need to process an international wire transfer today." She slid her ID across the counter along with the transfer instructions. The teller examined the documents, her eyes widening slightly at the amount. "This is for $2.5 million, ma'am." "That's correct," Jasmine nodded. "For transfers over $10,000, you'll need to speak with a manager. Let me call someone to help you." The teller picked up her phone and spoke quietly into it. "That's fine," Jasmine replied, gathering her documents. She was used to this procedure for large transfers. It was standard protocol, and she'd done it many times before. "Please have a seat in the waiting area," the teller gestured to a row of chairs against the wall. "A manager will be with you shortly." Jasmine thanked her and moved to the waiting area. She sat down, crossing her legs and opening her portfolio again to review the acquisition documents one more time. The deal had been in the works for months. Purchasing a small but innovative AI development firm in Singapore that would give Horizon Technologies an edge in the Asian market. 20 minutes passed. Jasmine noticed several other customers being called into the manager's office, including a white man in jeans and a polo shirt who had arrived after her. She watched as he was promptly escorted into an office for his consultation. 30 minutes now. Jasmine's phone buzzed again. The Singapore team was getting anxious about the delay. She looked up at the receptionist's desk, making eye contact and offering a questioning smile. The receptionist seemed to suddenly remember her waiting there and picked up her phone. Jasmine smoothed her pants and straightened her blouse, taking another deep breath. She was used to being patient, used to sometimes being overlooked despite her position. But today's timing was crucial for the deal to go through before the weekend. Little did she know that what was about to happen would shake this bank to its very foundation, and her ordinary Friday afternoon would turn into something that would change company policies and spark important conversations across the entire banking industry. Jasmine checked her watch again. Nearly 40 minutes had passed now. Around her, the bank continued its busy Friday afternoon routine. Tellers called customers forward, the security guard nodded at people entering, and the low hum of business conversations filled the air. Yet here she sat, still waiting, while her phone continued to buzz with messages from her team in Singapore. Finally, Jasmine stood up and walked back to the receptionist's desk. The young woman looked up, a flicker of recognition crossing her face. "Excuse me," Jasmine said politely. I've been waiting for quite some time to see a manager about a wire transfer. It's really quite urgent. The receptionist blinked rapidly. Oh, I'm so sorry. Let me check on that for you again. She picked up her phone and dialed an extension. Mr. Dawson? That client for the wire transfer is still waiting. Yes, the one I mentioned earlier. Yes, sir. She put down the phone and offered an apologetic smile. He'll be right out. Jasmine nodded her thanks and stepped back, but didn't return to her seat. From where she stood, she could see through the glass walls of several offices. In one, a bank employee was laughing with a customer in a golf shirt. In another, papers were being signed with handshakes all around. The door to the largest office opened, and a man in his 50s with graying temples and an expensive suit emerged. He glanced around the lobby, his eyes passing over Jasmine before circling back. He frowned slightly as he approached, not bothering to extend his hand. "You're waiting for assistance?" he asked, his voice carrying a hint of impatience. "Yes," Jasmine replied, extending her hand. "I'm Jasmine Williams. I need to process an international wire transfer today." He ignored her outstretched hand. "I'm Richard Dawson, branch manager. What kind of transfer are we talking about?" Jasmine noticed several customers looking their way. Unlike the other clients who had been escorted to private offices, she was being questioned in the middle of the lobby. "It's a business transfer," she explained calmly. "I'd be happy to go over the details in your office." Dawson made no move toward his office. "And how much is this transfer for?" "It's for $2.5 million, Jasmine said, lowering her voice. "For my company's acquisition of—" "2.5 million?" Dawson interrupted, his eyebrows shooting up. He gave a quick look toward the security guard, then back to Jasmine. "And you're authorized to move that kind of money?" A couple nearby stopped their conversation to listen. The receptionist pretended to be busy with paperwork, but Jasmine could tell she was paying attention too. "Yes, I am," Jasmine replied, keeping her voice steady despite the growing knot in her stomach. She'd been through enough business situations to recognize what was happening. "I'm the CEO of Horizon Technologies. We maintain several accounts here totaling over $15 million. Dawson's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes did, a flicker of disbelief. "Do you have ID?" he asked, still making no move to invite her to his office. "Of course." Jasmine opened her portfolio and handed over her driver's license and company documentation. Dawson examined her license, looking back and forth between the photo and her face several times. He flipped through the company documents with barely a glance. "These look interesting," he said finally. "But for a transaction of this size, we'd need more substantial proof of your authority." Jasmine felt a familiar heat rise in her chest, not embarrassment, but the controlled anger she'd learned to manage throughout her career. She'd grown Horizon Technologies from nothing, navigating an industry that wasn't always welcoming to women, especially women of color. She knew what it was to be underestimated. "I've done larger transfers than this many times before at this very branch," she said evenly. "Is there someone else who might recognize me? Perhaps Ms. Chen? She's handled my business for years." "Ms. Chen is on vacation this week," Dawson replied, handing back her documents. "And I don't recall seeing you here before." "I've been a client at this branch for 15 years, Jasmine said. She pulled out her phone. "Look, this transfer is time sensitive. I have a team waiting." "Ma'am," Dawson cut her off, his voice louder now. "If you're who you say you are, this shouldn't be a problem. Just come back another day with proper documentation and perhaps a company representative who can verify your identity." The lobby had grown quieter. Several people were openly watching now, some with uncomfortable expressions, others with mere curiosity. The security guard had shifted slightly closer. Jasmine realized this situation was quickly moving beyond a simple misunderstanding. Jasmine took a deep breath, feeling the eyes of everyone in the bank lobby on her. She'd faced moments like this before, situations where she had to decide whether to walk away or stand her ground. With $2.5 million and an international business deal hanging in the balance, walking away wasn't an option. "Mr. Dawson," she said, keeping her voice calm and professional, "I understand security protocols are important, but I've brought everything required for this transaction." She opened her portfolio again and laid out her documents on the counter between them. "Here's my driver's license, my company ID badge, the letter of authorization from our board, and our company's EIN verification. Dawson barely glanced at the documents. Anyone could print these out, he said with a dismissive wave of his hand. How do I know these are real? A woman waiting in line shifted uncomfortably. An older gentleman sitting nearby frowned at the manager's tone. You could verify our company in your system, Jasmine suggested. Horizon Technologies has been banking here for over a decade. Our company tax payments go through this very branch. Dawson crossed his arms. Look, I've never seen you before. You walk in here on a Friday afternoon asking to wire millions of dollars, and I'm supposed to just take your word that you're what did you say? The CEO. The way he said CEO made the title sound like a joke. Jasmine felt a flash of anger but pushed it down. She'd worked too hard to let this man's assumptions derail her company's future. Yes, I am the CEO, she confirmed. I founded Horizon Technologies 12 years ago. We specialize in enterprise software solutions and… Sure you are, Dawson interrupted with a chuckle, glancing at a teller who'd paused her work to watch. The teller quickly looked away, her face flushing. Jasmine raised an eyebrow. Excuse me. Nothing, Dawson said. It's just, CEOs don't typically handle these matters themselves. They send their financial officers. I prefer to handle major acquisitions personally, Jasmine replied, especially when they involve international partnerships. A young couple nearby whispered to each other, the woman shaking her head slightly. Dawson's smile didn't reach his eyes. Well, policy is policy. For a transfer of this size to an international account, I'd need to see additional verification. Perhaps a letter from your lawyer, or tax documents showing your position. Jasmine knew these weren't standard requirements. She'd done similar transactions many times before. What made today different was the manager. I've never been asked for those documents before, she said. What's really going on here, Mr. Dawson? The manager's face hardened. I'm following security protocols to protect the bank and our clients. Large transfers like this are exactly how fraud happens. Are you suggesting I'm committing fraud? Jasmine asked, her voice steady but carrying enough to make several people turn their heads. I'm not suggesting anything, Dawson replied, lowering his voice slightly. I'm simply saying we need to be careful. If you're legitimate, you should understand that. Jasmine noticed the security guard had moved closer, watching their interaction carefully. This was escalating in a way she hadn't anticipated when she'd walked through the bank's doors less than an hour ago. I'd like to speak to someone else, she said firmly. Is there another manager available? Dawson's jaw tightened. I'm the senior manager on duty today. If you're uncomfortable with our security measures, perhaps you should try another bank. He slid her documents back toward her. Or, like I said, come back another day with proper verification. The dismissal was clear and clearly unfair. Jasmine's phone buzzed again in her pocket. The Singapore team was still waiting. The acquisition papers needed the wire transfer today to lock in the agreed-upon price. This isn't right, she said quietly, but with authority, and we both know it. For a moment, Dawson looked taken aback by her directness. Then his expression hardened again. If you have a complaint about our procedures, you're welcome to contact our corporate office. He gestured toward the door. Now, if there's nothing else I can help you with today. The security guard took a step forward, though he remained at a respectful distance. Jasmine realized she had reached a breaking point. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about every person who'd ever been dismissed, underestimated, or denied service based on how they looked. She reached for her phone. Actually, she said, scrolling through her contacts, there is something else you can help me with. You can explain your actions to your regional director. Jasmine held her phone in her hand, her thumb hovering over the contact name, Anthony Rivera, regional director. She'd met him several times at charity events and business functions. They weren't close friends, but they had a solid professional relationship built on mutual respect. Dawson's expression shifted slightly. Who are you calling? Anthony Rivera, Jasmine said clearly. The regional director for National Trust's downtown district. A flicker of uncertainty crossed Dawson's face. You know Mr. Rivera? Yes, I do. Jasmine didn't elaborate further. She pressed the call button and put the phone to her ear, maintaining eye contact with Dawson. The bank lobby had grown even quieter. The security guard glanced at Dawson, seemingly unsure whether to approach or back away. The tellers slowed their work, watching the scene unfold. After 3 rings, a deep voice answered. Anthony Rivera speaking. Mr. Rivera, this is Jasmine Williams, CEO of Horizon Technologies, she said, her voice calm but carrying through the quiet lobby. I'm at your downtown branch right now, and I'm having an unusual problem that I hope you can help me resolve. Jasmine. Of course. What seems to be the issue? His voice was warm and professional. Dawson's face had gone a shade paler. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, suddenly looking less sure of himself. I came in to process an international wire transfer for our Singapore acquisition, the one I mentioned when we spoke last month at the Chamber of Commerce dinner, Jasmine explained. But your branch manager, Mr. Dawson, seems to think I'm attempting to commit fraud. He's refusing to process the transaction and has suggested I leave and try another bank. There was a pause on the line. I see, Rivera said, his tone shifting to something more serious. And Mr. Dawson is there with you now? Yes, he's standing right in front of me. Would you like to speak with him? Please put him on. Jasmine extended the phone toward Dawson, who hesitated before taking it. His hand was visibly tense as he brought the phone to his ear. This is Richard Dawson, he said, attempting to sound confident. Jasmine couldn't hear what Rivera was saying, but Dawson's reactions told the story. His eyes widened slightly, then narrowed. His posture stiffened, and a thin sheen of sweat appeared on his forehead. Yes, sir. I understand, sir, Dawson said repeatedly, his voice getting quieter. I was only following. Yes, sir. No, I didn't realize. Of course, sir. The customers and staff watched in uncomfortable silence. An older woman sitting nearby caught Jasmine's eye and gave her a small, supportive nod. After about 2 minutes, Dawson handed the phone back to Jasmine. Mr. Rivera would like to speak with you again, he said stiffly. Jasmine, Rivera's voice came through immediately. I want to personally apologize for your experience today. This is completely unacceptable and not how we treat any of our clients, let alone someone of your standing with our institution. I appreciate that, Anthony, she replied. I'm leaving a meeting right now to come down there personally, he continued. I should be there in about 15 minutes. In the meantime, I've instructed Mr. Dawson to take you to his office immediately and begin processing your wire transfer with his full assistance. Thank you, Jasmine said. I appreciate your prompt attention to this matter. It's the least I can do. I'll see you shortly. Jasmine ended the call and slipped her phone back into her pocket. The lobby remained unnaturally quiet, everyone waiting to see what would happen next. Dawson cleared his throat. Ms. Williams, if you'll follow me to my office, I'd be happy to assist you with your transaction. His tone had completely changed, formality replacing dismissiveness. Thank you, Jasmine replied coolly, gathering her documents. As she followed Dawson toward his office, she could feel the eyes of everyone in the bank following them. Inside the office, Dawson gestured to a chair across from his desk. Please have a seat. Can I get you some water or coffee while we process your transfer? No, thank you, Jasmine said. I'd just like to complete my business as quickly as possible. Dawson nodded, suddenly all efficiency and politeness. Of course, let me pull up your accounts right away. As he typed on his computer, Jasmine noticed his hands were shaking slightly. In 15 minutes, the regional director would arrive, and both of them knew this situation was far from resolved. The minutes ticked by in uncomfortable silence. Dawson worked on his computer, occasionally asking Jasmine for information about the wire transfer in a stiff, overly polite tone that contrasted sharply with his earlier dismissiveness. Jasmine provided the details calmly, keeping her responses brief and professional. She texted her team in Singapore. Transfer being processed now. Sorry for the delay. We'll update soon. Then she set her phone on the desk and watched Dawson work, noticing how he avoided meeting her eyes. A light knock on the door broke the tension. Dawson's assistant peeked in. Mr. Rivera has arrived, she announced, her voice betraying a hint of nervousness. Send him in, Dawson said, standing up quickly and straightening his tie. The door opened wider, and Anthony Rivera walked in. He was a tall man with salt and pepper hair, dressed in an impeccable navy suit. His expression was serious as he entered, but it softened immediately when he saw Jasmine. Jasmine, he said warmly, crossing the room to shake her hand. It's good to see you, though I wish it were under better circumstances. Anthony, she replied with a genuine smile. Thank you for coming so quickly. Rivera turned to Dawson, his expression cooling noticeably. Richard, I'd like a word with you in private after we've taken care of Ms. Williams' transaction. Dawson nodded stiffly. Yes to her. Rivera turned back to Jasmine. Now, I understand you need to process a wire transfer for the Singapore acquisition, the one we discussed at the chamber dinner. That's right, Jasmine confirmed. We've been working on this deal for months. The paperwork is finalized, and we just need to transfer the funds today to close before the weekend. Of course, Rivera said. He looked at Dawson's computer screen. How far along are we with the transfer? Dawson cleared his throat. I've pulled up Ms. Williams' accounts and verified her identity in our system. We're ready to process the transfer now. Rivera raised an eyebrow. Her identity has been verified now. Interesting. He didn't elaborate further, but the implication was clear. Jasmine watched as Dawson's face reddened slightly. He clicked through several screens, working quickly to complete the transfer. Ms. Williams is one of our most valued clients, Rivera said, taking a seat beside Jasmine. Horizon Technologies has been with National Trust since before I joined the bank. In fact, he added, looking directly at Dawson, the loan committee approved the construction loan for this very branch building based largely on Ms. Williams' personal recommendation and her company's significant deposits with us. Dawson looked up in surprise, his fingers freezing on the keyboard. This branch? Yes, Rivera confirmed. 3 years ago, when we were expanding our downtown presence, Ms. Williams served on our community advisory board at the time. The revelation hung in the air. Jasmine maintained her composed expression, though she couldn't help feeling a small sense of satisfaction at Dawson's obvious discomfort. I wasn't aware, Dawson mumbled, returning his attention to the computer. There's a lot you weren't aware of, it seems, Rivera said coolly. A notification chimed on the computer. Dawson looked at the screen. The transfer has been approved and is processing now, he announced. The funds should reach Singapore by Monday morning their time, well within your deadline. Perfect, Jasmine said, checking her watch. I appreciate the efficiency now that we've cleared up any misunderstandings. Rivera nodded. Is there anything else you need while you're here, Jasmine? Any other matters we can assist with? Not today, she replied. I just needed this wire transfer completed. Consider it done, Rivera said. He turned to Dawson. Please print a confirmation of the transfer for Ms. Williams. Dawson nodded and sent the document to the printer. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife as they waited for the printer to finish. When the confirmation was ready, Dawson handed it to Jasmine with a forced smile. Here you are, Ms. Williams. Thank you for your business. Jasmine accepted the paper, reviewing it carefully before tucking it into her portfolio. She stood up, and both men rose as well. Jasmine, may I walk you out? Rivera asked. Of course, she replied. At the office door, Rivera turned back to Dawson. Wait here. I'll be back shortly. As they walked through the bank lobby, Jasmine noticed that many of the same customers and staff who had witnessed her earlier treatment were still there, watching with curious expressions as she left the bank, accompanied by the regional director. The story was far from over. Outside the bank, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the sidewalk. Jasmine took a deep breath of fresh air, feeling some of the tension leave her shoulders. I want to apologize again for what happened today, Rivera said, his voice sincere. This isn't how we do business, and it certainly isn't how we treat someone of your standing, or any client, for that matter. Jasmine nodded. I appreciate that, Anthony. But I have to ask, is this an isolated incident, or is there a larger problem here? Rivera sighed, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. I wish I could say it was just Dawson having a bad day, but I've heard whispers about similar situations. Nothing this blatant, but enough to concern me. He looked genuinely troubled. Your experience today makes me realize we need to take a much harder look at what's happening in our branches. I'm glad to hear you say that, Jasmine replied, because this wasn't just about me. It's about anyone who walks into that bank and gets judged based on how they look rather than who they are. You're absolutely right, Rivera agreed. And I promise you this will be addressed. Starting right now. He checked his watch. Will you be available early next week? I'd like to discuss some changes we need to make, and your input would be invaluable. Of course, Jasmine said. My assistant can set something up. They shook hands, and Jasmine watched as Rivera turned and walked back into the bank, his posture determined. She texted her team in Singapore with confirmation that the transfer was complete, then leaned against a pillar, taking a moment to process everything that had happened. Inside the bank, Rivera returned to Dawson's office without stopping to speak to anyone else. He closed the door firmly behind him. Through the glass walls, customers and staff alike could see the two men, though they couldn't hear what was being said. Rivera stood tall, his back straight as he addressed Dawson, who remained seated behind his desk. At first, Dawson appeared to be defending himself, gesturing with his hands and speaking rapidly. But as Rivera continued, Dawson's shoulders slumped, and he fell silent. The tellers exchanged glances. The security guard pretended to be focused on the entrance, but his eyes kept darting toward the manager's office. A young banker leading a client to a desk whispered something to her colleague as they passed. Inside the office, Rivera's expression was stone cold. "Do you understand the seriousness of what happened here today?" he asked, his voice level but hard. "I was just following protocol for large transfers," Dawson insisted, though his voice lacked conviction. "How was I supposed to know who she was?" "That's exactly the problem," Rivera shot back. "You shouldn't have to know who she is to treat her with respect and follow proper procedures. Every client deserves that basic courtesy. But a $2.5 million transfer, which you could have verified in our system in less than 2 minutes," Rivera cut him off. "Instead, you questioned her identity, suggested her documents were fake, and humiliated her in front of the entire branch. Tell me, would you have done the same to Mr. Patterson when he came in last week to wire money to his son's school in Switzerland?" Dawson's face flushed. "That was different." "How?" Rivera demanded. "Because he's a 60-year-old white man in a golf shirt? Because you play cards with him at the club? Explain the difference to me." Dawson had no answer. Rivera walked to the window, looking out at the busy street for a moment before turning back. "I've known Jasmine Williams for years. She built her company from nothing into one of our largest commercial accounts. She serves on 3 nonprofit boards in this city. She's funded scholarships for underprivileged kids, and today she walked into her own bank, a bank that literally exists in this location because of her support, and was treated like a criminal." The silence stretched between them. Outside the office, staff pretended to work while stealing glances at the unfolding drama. "Richard," Rivera said finally, "I need your keys and your ID badge." Dawson's head snapped up. "What? You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious in my life," Rivera replied. "What happened today violated everything this institution stands for: our values, our policies, and basic human decency." "You're firing me?" "Over one misunderstanding?" Dawson's voice rose in disbelief. "This wasn't a misunderstanding," Rivera said firmly. "This was a revealing moment, and I can't have someone with your judgment, or lack thereof, representing this bank." The entire lobby fell silent as Dawson placed his keys and badge on the desk with shaking hands. 1 week later, Jasmine sat in her corner office overlooking the city skyline. The Singapore deal had gone through perfectly, and her team was already working on integrating the new company into Horizon Technologies. On her computer screen, a press release from National Trust Bank caught her attention. National Trust Bank announces new diversity and inclusion initiatives following recent incident. She smiled slightly as she read through the details. The bank was implementing comprehensive anti-bias training for all employees, reviewing their customer service policies, and creating a community advisory board focused on ensuring equitable treatment for all clients. A knock on her door pulled her attention away from the screen. Her assistant poked her head in. "Mr. Rivera is here to see you," she announced. "Sent him in," Jasmine replied, standing to greet her visitor. Anthony Rivera entered, looking more relaxed than he had during their last encounter. They shook hands warmly. "Thank you for making time to see me," he said as they both took seats at the small conference table by the window. "Of course," Jasmine replied. "I just read the press release. Sounds like you're making real changes. Rivera nodded. That's actually what I wanted to talk to you about. He placed a folder on the table between them. We're not just putting out press releases, we're taking concrete steps to make sure what happened to you never happens to anyone else. He opened the folder to reveal a detailed plan. We've already begun a top-to-bottom review of our customer service protocols. We've hired a diversity consultant to help us identify blind spots. And starting next month, every employee will undergo intensive training on recognizing and addressing unconscious bias. Jasmine leaned forward, genuinely interested. That's impressive, Anthony. A lot of companies would have just fired Dawson and considered the matter closed. That would have been easier, Rivera admitted, but it wouldn't have addressed the real problem. What happened that day wasn't just about one manager. It was about a culture that allowed his behavior to exist unchallenged. Jasmine nodded thoughtfully. Have you gotten any pushback? Some, Rivera said with a slight grimace. Change isn't always comfortable. But our board is fully behind these initiatives, especially after I shared the details of what happened to you, with your permission, of course. And what about your customers? Have they noticed any differences yet? Rivera smiled. It's early days, but yes, we've already implemented some immediate changes in how we greet and assist clients. The feedback has been mostly positive. He hesitated before continuing, which brings me to the other reason I'm here today. He turned to a different page in the folder. National Trust is creating a new position on our board of directors, someone specifically focused on customer experience and community relations. He looked up at Jasmine. We'd like you to consider taking on that role. Jasmine raised her eyebrows in surprise. Me? You want me on your board? Who better? Rivera asked simply. You've built a successful company that puts customer needs first. You have deep ties to this community. And you've experienced firsthand what happens when we get it wrong. He leaned forward. You wouldn't just be a token appointment, Jasmine. We want your expertise and your perspective. Jasmine sat back in her chair, considering the offer. A week ago, she'd been humiliated in the lobby of this very bank. Now she was being asked to help shape its future. I'll need some time to think about it, she said honestly. This would be a significant commitment. Of course, Rivera agreed. Take all the time you need. As he gathered his materials to leave, Jasmine had one more question. What happened to Dawson? Rivera's expression grew serious. He's gone. And not just from our branch. He won't be working in banking again, at least not in this city. I made sure of that. After Rivera left, Jasmine walked to her window and looked out at the city below. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. Still on for dinner tonight? Jasmine smiled and typed back, absolutely. And Mom, you won't believe what happened today. 6 months later, Jasmine sat at the head of a conference table in National Trust Bank's headquarters. Around her sat bank executives, branch managers, and community representatives. On the wall behind her hung a framed set of principles, the new customer service guidelines she had helped develop. Today marks the official launch of our community banking initiative, she announced to the group. Every person who walks through our doors deserves to be treated with dignity, respect, and fairness, no exceptions. The room erupted in applause. What had begun as a painful experience had transformed into something powerful and positive, not just for Jasmine, but for countless others who would never know her story but would benefit from the changes it inspired.